Now that we have the strong back built, it's time to get it set up. To set it up, we're going to need some shims and a level to make sure that the strong back is nice and level all the way through. We're also going to need a chalk line to identify the center line of the strong back. We're also going to need a pencil or pen or some kind of marker, and a square. A carpenter's square will do just fine. We're also going to need some wooden blocks that we're going to attach our station forms to, and the screws that go with them. So I use number 8 screws. I use 2-inch screws or 2.5-inch screws. And then we'll also need some smaller screws, 1-inch or 1.5-inch will be good. We're going to need the driver to drive the screws. And if you haven't cut your blocks already, you're going to need either a table saw, bandsaw, or a circular saw, or a hand saw. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is level the strong back. Before I begin, I'm just going to let you know that when I set up the strong back on the platform in the shop floor, I've gone through along the strong back and just made sure that the base isn't sitting crooked or sitting on something that I didn't notice, that it's stable all the way through. It's important to do that before you start leveling it, because if you go through the process of leveling it and then find out later on that there was a piece of wood under, one corner of the base, setting the strong back, out of whack, and then you have it all leveled and that piece of wood comes out when you're building, then you could end up having a twist in your boat. So the first thing we're going to do is take the level and we're just going to set it up, right? And we're just going to see how level our strong back is. Okay, so you can see the strong back is slightly out of level. The strong back level. All I've had to do is put a couple cedar shims underneath one end. Fortunately for me, my strong back is now nicely level. The chalk line along the center of the strong back. The benefit of the chalk line is that even if my strong back platform is slightly off, meaning that it has a slight curve to it, I now have a center line that runs completely straight all the way down the platform. And using that center line, I'll be able to set up my station forms so that they're all perfectly even with each other. Okay, so all I'm doing right now is I'm marking every 6 inches down the strong. Most station forms, the spacing is every 12 inches, but by marking every 6, I'm setting myself up for just an extra measurement along the way. Okay, now with the tape measure still in place, I'm just going to mark quickly each foot increment. This is just to make it a lot easier in the future for setup. Now that I've got my center line marked, I'm going to use a carpenter square or a T-square, and using my chalk line, I'm going to line it up and scribe across my 1 foot, 2 foot, and so on marks. These lines are going to be reference points for setting up the station forms. Okay, now that we have our center line and our foot increment marks in place along the strong back platform, the next step is to cut blocks of wood that are going to fasten onto the platform and our our station forms will attach to. Okay, so my strong back is 9 inches wide. So I've made each of my blocks 9 inches wide so that they'll fit across just like that. Alright, so if you've made a strong back that's 12 inches wide, you could make your blocks 12 inches. But in all reality, I probably could have gone 8 inches or maybe even 6 inches, and that'd be fine. The main thing that you want to do is just make sure that you provide enough base support for your station forms. Okay, so to think that you're going to do a 3-inch block, it's probably not going to cut it. Okay, for my blocks, I've just used 2x4, okay, and 2x4 is great, and you probably don't have to do this next step, but I always do just to ensure that the station forms seat up against the blocks really nice. 2x4s have this radius on each edge, so what I do is I just trim that off so that it's a nice sharp edge. I'm lucky enough to have a joiner in my shop. If you don't have a joiner, you can use a table saw, and again, it's probably not necessary, but it does make sure that you're going to have a nice snug fit from the station form to the block and down to the strong back platform. Now I'm going to take my blocks and I'm going to fasten them to the strong back. I'm not going to fasten them to the station forms first, okay? And the reason is, if I try to fasten the blocks to the station form first, I might end up having the block a little bit too high, a millimeter or so, or a little bit too low, okay? And then when I go to attach it to the strong back platform, the station form's not going to sit properly, all right? And it's going to end up, tipping forward or back. So attach the block to the strong back. Each block of wood gets lined up along the pencil line that marks the foot increment spacing. So now setting up the station forms is going to be quite simple. I've already got my center line marked along the strong back platform. And you remember from the lofting video, we've also got a center line marked on our station forms. I've got the cross lines marked at every foot and the blocks already attached, nice and even with those lines. So now all I need to do is line up my center line from the station form with the center line on the strong back platform. Okay, now depending on the boat design that you're working on, the spacing of the blocks and the lines will be different. I'm working on a prospector canoe, and the spacing I'm using starts at the 2-foot mark. Okay, and that's why I marked the 1 foot, 2 foot, and so on as I went along. Okay, so all I need to do, like I said, is line up my center line with my center line. I've already got a couple screws seated in place there, and I'll just drive them in. Now, just a note on screws. I happen to be using Craig screws, which have a built-in washer so that you can't go too far. You don't have to use those. I find them, the best because, the stopping from going too far. But any screw will do. I wouldn't go below a 1-inch screw. 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches is probably the best. All right. You want to make sure that your station form is nicely secured. Once we start moving, you don't want it to be bumped and you have to get in there and try to fix it halfway through finishing a boat. Alright, so I'm going to attach the rest of the station forms and then we'll meet back to attach the stem form. So now we're going to attach the stem form. It gets attached a little bit differently. First, we're going to line up the center of the stem form with the center line of its previous form here. Then we're going to line up the bottom of the form with the center line. Then we're going to make sure that the bottom corner of the stem form is nice and tight, okay? Because if this form is leaning forward, you'll have a gap. Once you feel like you're comfortable and you have this centered, we're going to put a screw or two through this form into the edge of the stem form. Now we're going to take a 2x4 block and we're going to set it in place and we're going to screw it to the face of the station form and into the platform. Now with the block securely attached on the other side of the stem form, I'm going to take a couple screws and I'll drive them through. And now that's going to secure the stem form from shifting side to side, as well as attaching to the previous. Okay, and there you have it. We've set up our strong back and attached all the station forms.